admission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
School choice. Sweet-sounding words from sweet-sounding groups like the American Federation for Children. Well, the truth is alarming. These are the people caught marketing private school vouchers to illegal immigrants in Arizona. And they want to do the same in Texas. But Dwayne Burns said no. And that's why they're targeting him in this election. The voucher program they're pushing is a magnet for illegal immigration. Fully qualified to receive these $10,000 vouchers, illegal aliens would go to the front of the line ahead of U.S. citizens. These groups want to replace Dwayne Burns with a rubber stamp, and they've got one in Helen Kerwin. Kerwin has pledged to support this voucher scheme if elected, but we can't let that happen. Dwayne Burns' top priority is border security. He's stopped taxpayer-funded handouts to illegal aliens. And he's endorsed by every law enforcement association in Texas. Political ad paid for by the Dwayne Burns campaign.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Well, good afternoon, Johnson County. Welcome to today's episode of Let Freedom Ring. I'm your host, Jake Wernette. As always, it's good to see everybody. It's wonderful to be able to have continued listeners and viewers, as the goal of this show has and will always be to educate the citizens of this great republic, the great state of Texas, and the great county of Johnson County, as well as those who listen outside of the county. We have expanded our viewer base a lot to Arkansas, Michigan, and other folks have called in to my business line here in the past few months, talking about all the places that the show's expanded to. So we really want to thank everybody for that. With me today is Sean Goins, local biological man, as it says in the thing. You can't be too cautious anymore. It used to be a joke that I had heard growing up. You know, I didn't really understand it at the time. What I would always get asked by older people, you know what Victoria's Secret was? You know what Victoria's Secret was?
Oh, yeah, up close and personal.
Her name used to be Victor.
Oh.
So Sean is a good friend of mine. We go way back to high school. Many of you might remember he has been on here to discuss kind of economics, foreign policy, as well as the status of global empires at this stage in history. We kind of discussed China, Russia, and the United States, what our foreign outlook is as we compete in the coming century for, as you have said on your show that you host on several platforms now.
Yeah, American Liberty Media. You can find us on YouTube. We have a website. We're all over Instagram, Facebook.
Is it the American Imperium?
It's the show is called Unhinged, but I have sort of an American Millennium series. Essentially, we're seeing the die-off of any country that could really challenge us over the next few years. China's demographic collapse, China, Russia, Germany, South Korea, all these countries having demographic collapses.
Yeah.
It's really going to be America left. We'll be the lone superpower, us and our buddies in Canada, Britain, Australia, maybe Mexico. We're going to see an American world pretty soon here, and you're seeing this happen right now because this will require rapid industrialization. Our jobs are going to come back no matter what happens because China won't be able to make what we need again.
Yeah.
It's going to be wildly inflationary, and the rates are going to stay pretty high for probably the next 5 years at least. They might even increase.
So Sean does a really good job with his series, The American Millennium, on American Liberty Media. It's on YouTube. You can find them. Just look up Unhinged with Sean Goins. We'll put a link in the bio here when we put this one up. But today we're going to be doing something a little different compared to the usual broadcast. Today's going to be more so of an overlook of where we've come for the past year with the show. We're going to kind of discuss the state of the union, if you will, something that Joe Biden has still not been able to do, and something that I don't think even the most spineless Republicans will be able to do anymore.
Gas cost $4. That's the State of the Union.
We live in a time in this country's history where getting involved is more important than ever. Being able to be an educated, informed voter is about as important as name recognition, about as important as establishment recognition. So I want to kind of start off with a discussion. There was a man named Edmund Burke. Many people might not realize who he was or what he did. He was essentially a British philosopher who had reflected well on the French Revolution. Sean probably knows who I'm talking about.
Nope.
But
not a clue.
He wrote a book titled On the Revolution in France, where this is going to be today's quote. History consists for the greater part of the miseries brought upon the world by pride, ambition, avarice, revenge, lust, sedition, hypocrisy, ungoverned zeal, and all the train of disorderly appetites which shake the public with the same, tribulous storms that toss the private state and render life unsweet. These vices are causes of the storms. Religion, morals, laws, prerogatives, privileges, liberties, rights of men are the pretexts. The pretexts are always found in some spacious appearance of a real good. So Edmund Burke reflected in the French Revolution that where you find good pretexts, you find good societies. And good societies involve functional citizens. They involve educated citizens. James Madison would even later reflect that the greatest danger to tyrants is a well-informed citizenry. We in this country have nobody to blame but ourselves for where things have gotten. It is very easy for us to blame the Democrats. It's very easy for us to blame Republicans. Something, a bit of a bad view that I say a bad view. Many people will take this way out of context. But the recent controversy over House Speaker Dade Phelan having Democrat chairs with a Republican majority in the state house has been a bit of a controversy lately. There are a lot of us who would go out and vote for somebody purely because they say, I will get rid of Dade Phelan. I will get rid of Democrat chairs in the House. The world that we live in today, and this is to not excuse the Democrats, to excuse the people who are wanting to chop kids' wee-wees off and tell them they don't belong unless they are some sort of jerry-rigged creation in a lab somewhere. Our world is in a place where our vices, lust, avarice, revenge get the best of us. And the American society will follow with what the pretexts of our society hold. If we are so unwilling to work with somebody else, I kind of reflected this the other day when I saw the Palestinian protesters out again, this time setting up encampments at my own school, which they're 2 days away from summer. I mean, it's not like it's going to do much good. There's going to be nobody there. So have fun speaking and yelling to nobody, I guess. But there are two logical fallacies here, and I'm going to let Sean kind of discuss his prerogative on this a little bit as well. There are two things that I get from watching people say, I despise working with Democrats. Number one, if everybody was so convicted that the Republican platform was so perfect that everybody would keep Republicans in office, why do we still have Democrats? Why do we still have all these people? Well, that shows two subtexts there. Number one, that the logic is flawed, as it is with everything. We as humans are imperfect creatures. The Republican and the Democrat Party's platforms are never going to be aligned and perfectly aligned with every single voter. And thereby, because you have a diverse amount of brain power, people are going to vote different ways regardless of how perfect your platform is. That's where this boils down to. A pluralist society, which is what our country was founded to be. If we are so convicted that our ways are perfect, then everybody will want to follow it. Number two, what it shows is a lack of conviction too. You can overly convict yourself and say, well, this is perfect. I don't see why I would want to work with anybody else. My party, my candidate, sublime. It's perfect. Why would I ever want to work with anybody else? Your second cause can be a lack of conviction. Many people see the Republican Party and the Democratic Party platforms as so lacking with the common man now. So they are so unconvicted to what they believe that we are forced to divide ourselves from one another in order to counter the greater threat.
Can I say something on the Republican Party real quick?
Sure.
On the note of working with the Democrats and the platform of the party, you have to keep in mind Republicans have not won a popular election since the 90s. I'm referring to the presidential elections, of course.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting the majority of the Republicans that vote are baby boomers, the generation that's aging out rapidly, more rapidly than experts thought they would. The entire future of the Republican Party will go down to one thing. How well can we work with the Democrats to win over young people?
Yeah.
There will not be a Republican Party pretty soon here if they can't figure out that question.
And I think that really boils down to the young people's perspective as well. You can either be overly convicted and refuse to work with anybody else, or under convicted and refuse to work with anybody else. The two paths that I see the Republican Party taking right now is we are so unsure of ourselves with the way the world is going. We have leaders that are spineless, people that aren't willing to stand up, people that aren't willing to look the average voter in the eye and say, I'm a Republican that you can trust. It's become such an unconvicted party that the only way that we can win is by getting rid of the opposition. And that's really where both sides are at now.
So let's look at the school loan situation. Me and every average American agrees. You took a loan out, you pay it back.
Yeah.
We can also agree that maybe these institutions gave out predatory loans to dumb 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. Maybe it's time to have a compromise. The Democrats want to pay it off completely with taxpayer money. It's kind of unfair to the average taxpayer, especially someone like me who's using their GI Bill to go through school debt-free. Yeah. So how do we help everyone, help our fellow countrymen without screwing over people? Well, it's easy. Just suspend the interest payments. They still pay back the amount they owe, just no interest. They're paying back what they owe, but no interest. That's it. That's simple. Everyone wins. It helps our country. The people who gave out the loans, the institutions, the banks, they get their money back. The taxpayer doesn't get screwed over. Both parties can claim a victory, and young people can afford houses again. The Democrats are too crazy to do that midway solution because they're the Democrats, and the Republicans are too stupid to do it because the Republicans are infamous for what's called snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. The Republicans will not allow anything that could give them a victory that could actually keep their party going. This is one of the reasons that we're more or less dying out. If you're a conservative or a Christian conservative, anywhere in that range, even in the state of Texas, your days of being represented are numbered. When the baby boomers are gone, when they are aging out really rapidly, we will never again have an elected Republican outside the very rural counties. And that's a very optimistic scenario. We've already lost Dallas. We're losing Tarrant.
I
We lost a school board position in Tarrant pretty recently, these municipal elections that just happened. The two Republicans had a massive voter advantage, but the party couldn't unify behind one person, so they split the vote and a Democrat won, and they were a very far left Democrat.
I think it ties in too. Most people
In Tarrant County, this is.
that remember Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, Sean, you've probably heard this line too. Teddy Roosevelt was one of the greatest Republicans in history. Well, we look at him, and of course, I believe it was his cousin, Franklin Roosevelt. Many of them were aligned in some key aspects.
This is Teddy and FDR.
Yeah. So Teddy Roosevelt, during the Gilded Age, many people might have learned this in AP US history. Teddy Roosevelt was essentially a muckraker. He went in to these corporations, started trust busting. He started going in and creating things. The FDA was one of them that came out of it. The Department of Health came out of that as well. The lineage agency that started the Department of Health. All of these things came out of not sort of the modern sense of what republicanism holds, but the idea that you had a lot of migrants in these inner cities and a lot of Native Americans, and I say Native Americans not as in, the Indians, but the people that were natural born citizens here, going to factories, getting ill. Meat processing plants would give out diseased meat. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, a very good book on this, I might add. But Teddy Roosevelt, who is hailed as one of the greatest Republicans of all time, enforced some of the most new age stuff that you could see in the Gilded Age. Trust busting laws that Taft had taken over. He started the FDA to kind of cut down on the effects of poor products, poor produced meat, and life improved vastly after that was implemented. He also implemented national parks. So I think we look back at the perspective of this is where our party is at is nowhere where it used to be. The common sense, middle ground policy of being conservative, holding traditional values, but making progress in the right areas to where society around us can prosper.
I have a question I want to ask, not just you,
Sure.
but anyone listening. Name one thing Republicans have conserved. Give me an answer. What can you list off? Every position that was dug in has been abandoned before the fight even begun.
Especially you look at Speaker Mike Johnson, the guy that campaigned for House Speaker. You remember he said, "I will not give one more dime."
He has sent so much money to the Ukraine, to Israel. Some of that stuff made its way to Palestine to fund Hamas.
Yeah,
through the back door, of course.
Especially on his watch, letting the $10 billion get freed up to go to Iran.
For an America First Republican, it sounds like America Last, and this is what really angers me. The best patriotic people we can find will still sell out our country to help Israel. It's time to bring it home. We have to help America. Gas is $4 a gallon. The average American can't afford a home anymore. Gen Z and millennials have 90% less spending power than the baby boomers. Our infrastructure is falling apart, and we have transvestites walking around trying to read books to kids. Like, we have a crisis here at home. It's time to bring the empire home. I don't care about Israel. I don't care about Ukraine. I don't care about Palestine. Bring it home.
And I think that's the one thing that I've looked at too is you have a lot of, we discussed this last week on the show, how the communists kind of infiltrated.
It's not just the communists.
The whole Israel-Palestine thing.
It's not communism. It's not fascism. It's stupidity and people putting America last.
That's not up to debate. I'm just saying simply that we have, both sides have been played by the same enemy. People who are going to go after the least common denominator, the lowest IQ, the people who aren't catching up with history, those people are going to be taken advantage of, regardless.
It is spoiled, educated kids, mostly white women, who want a cause to get behind because they're not married, or they're not going to get married because of the feminist lie, and they're trying to get behind. They got to back the poor Palestinian refugees or whatever. And guess what? We have more chaos at home. Isn't that funny? No matter what happens, we have more chaos at home. Things just get more expensive. There's more traffic blocks for protests in the major cities. The economy continues to suffer. Like I said, we have a crisis here at home. We need to stop this. I don't care what's going on over there. No one does. It's time to actually sit down as a country and say, hey, we need to take care of ourselves. Let's stop these protests. Who cares anything about Black Lives Matter or what's the battle cry for Palestine, from the river to the sea? Is that it? No, we need to go back to isolationism. This is stupidity.
I think neutrality is a lost art. I think there is.
I don't want neutrality. I want pro-American. Pro-America means no one else. Bring it home.
I mean, the whole concept of neutrality started World War I. We weren't getting involved with either side.
Yeah, how'd that go?
I think that goes back to exactly the concept of isolation that George Washington had pretexted for American foreign policy up until Madison. We don't want anybody in this hemisphere but the American power. And we also don't want to expand our own interest to that abroad to get corrupted and yoked up with foreign wars, foreign entanglements.
If I'm not mistaken, George Washington said that in one of his speeches, maybe his farewell address.
I believe it was.
Okay. You're more of the history guys, I thought I'd ask.
We have seen a lot happen. And I had told Sean before the show started, I've got in the briefcase here, not a list of 200 people in the State Department, but several hundred.
That's the other briefcase.
Articles. I don't know if everybody can see this, but this is bigger, almost thicker than my entire hand.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, I'm not going to pull every one of them out here, but for the people who have come after the show, for the people who have kind of made snarky comments, this is every factual, credible source article that we've presented to you in the last year. A size that if I put it here, it'd be bigger, taller than my tennis shoe. So our show has presented plenty of credible sources, plenty of things about topics from domestic, local policy to foreign policy. The question that we have as American people to answer is, where do we go from here? We can present all sorts of stuff. We can present 900 articles. We could present twice this amount in one day. But the problem is that we, as Americans, have gotten too conformist. We've gotten too inclined to the way things are going. We've put ease over being able to put up a fight again. And I really think we have put price over people, profit over people. We've put
maximize shareholder value. Isn't that the meme going around right now?
Yeah.
The Reagan economics type. I'm about to go another tangent if you'd permit me.
Yeah, you're good.
I don't want to take up all your time. Reagan. All this started with Ronald Reagan, and that's another reason the Republican Party is losing and dying off. Their big obsession, other than Donald Trump, is Ronald Reagan, the guy who started the corporate takeover of America, whose Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, started the housing crisis, have resulted in further housing crisis run right now, and has continued to strip the middle class of its equity, its wealth.
If I'm not mistaken, the bailout program started under Reagan, too.
The idea was we give all the wealthy people the money from the government, although those wealthy people tend to sit in government and vote in government. Isn't that a coincidence? And for whatever reason, out of the kindness of their hearts, American exceptionalism, they pull themselves up by the bootstraps and give the money to all the poor people. Yeah, now we have 90% less spending power than our grandparents and great-grandparents. I don't think this is working very well. It's as if we need to get government out of everything and go back to what works, which is Americans helping Americans, not the government helping Americans. I probably just put a price on my head for saying something.
Sean, if you want to go on for another minute, I'm going to pull up an article. I bought the Life magazine from 1969 when Nixon was president.
Google me something else. One thing else.
Okay.
Google the national debt under Ronald Reagan. This deficit spending, it started before him, but that's when it started really kicking up. And everyone claims, well, we won the Cold War because of him. The Soviet Union was a Russian backwater. 400 years behind us in almost every way, with the exception of the technology they stole from the Germans or we gave them to help win World War II. That was it. The Soviet Union would have collapsed on its own. We have entered this deficit spending, and now it's time to pay the price. And we are shifting that cost onto the younger generations, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, coming up Generation Alpha. If I'm not mistaken, we're almost 150 trillion in debt. That is the largest debt ever in
total.
History.
We are about 34 trillion in just national debt that we owe to the citizens.
Yeah, no, I mean like the whole
credit card
thing.
debt. I think totals 22 trillion on top of that as well.
Yeah, this is the largest debt ever accrued in human history. Our value, or the value of our dollar, is dropping. It's in free fall. And the same baby boomer Republicans and baby boomer Democrats, who it's the hippies and the Reaganites, are like, well, we got to back Palestine or we got to back Israel. We need to back America.
Yeah.
That's what it's time to do.
I may have to bring it. There was a 1969 article in Time magazine talking about, and without going on too long trying to look it up because we have to spare the time that we have for the show.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. And if you're free Thursday, I'll bring the article on. It featured 5 or 6 different interviews that Time magazine had done with it's a Life magazine. Life magazine. Their 1969
Was this Nixon?
inflation issue. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was under Nixon. Here it is. Here it is. So it was the August 15th, 1969 issue.
I'm waiting to see what he pulls up, people. I'm scared.
Issue article, maybe. I thought it was really interesting because when I went in and looked at the cover, for those of you who don't know the issue that I'm talking about, this is essentially it. And I'm going to pull it up here and show it to you on the screen. This is what I'll bring on this Thursday. But it was Life magazine's high taxes and high prices makes everybody feel poor. The dollar squeeze. So in the article here, and I'm just going to leave it up there while we're discussing it. They were talking about the space program, all of the debt that we had racked up from the space program, all of this stuff just to beat the Soviet Union. In one of them, it said, I don't even feel like I can make a living anymore.
That's how most people feel now.
In one of it, the lady literally said, cut the space program entirely. So without arguing about the ethics of getting to the moon, I thought getting to the moon was one of the greatest monumental moments in human history.
Do me a favor. Can you Google American credit card debt?
Yeah.
The average American makes 50 grand a year after taxes. The average American is also having to use their credit card to buy groceries now. Wages have not risen since the 1980s. Again, Reaganomics.
73. They've been stagnant ever since.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. I love that. That gives you an idea of what trajectory we're on.
So the national debt now, many people confuse national debt with foreign debt. National debt is every penny that we owe to the American citizens through using our savings to make spurious loans to the federal government, which then, in order to keep those banks going, and Sean could correct me on this if I'm using the wrong terminology here, he was in mortgage and loan, is
And commercial.
when they make spurious loans, usually a bank will get shut down for that.
Yeah.
For unethical programs.
I'll let you finish.
But what happens is because the largest 13 banks make up all the sitting members of the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Reserve will just vote to print more money to back it up. And the FDIC will insure all of those accounts, all of the loans that are made to the federal government. So that adds to the national debt because we're printing more money to offset that. We are rising at $1 trillion every 100 days now. And the interest payments are going to be $1 trillion a year on top of that $1 trillion every 100 days.
Two things. One, keep in mind, we have a declining population now, meaning we have even less people to pay this off. And two, a great movie called Margin Call. Go watch it, people. Basically, Lehman Brothers, an investment bank that specialized in CMOs, collectivized mortgage obligations.
Yeah.
They overexposed themselves. They overextended. And then we got the 2008 housing crisis. We're about to have this at the national level if we can't figure this out, people.
Yeah.
This is bad. I'm sorry to sound over dramatic.
So
look at. Can they see this?
You're not too far off.
Can the average audience member see what we're looking at?
Yeah, let's pull it up here. So we're on Debt Clock, usdebtclock.org. So Sean wasn't too far off when he said this isn't bad, or this is a bad scenario to be in. U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio. We were at 52.92% in 1960. We're now at 122.25%. You weren't too far off earlier when you said, it's getting bad. The U.S. total debt. Now, mind you, we're looking at, I'm going to zoom out here. Total debt here is the U.S. total debt, household, business, state, local governments, financial institutions, all those things that Alexander Hamilton, one reason I hate the guy to a T is because he said, let's assume states' debts. Let's assume every debt on down the line. Well, now this is all our country owes. We are now sitting at $100 trillion in debt.
We have like another 40 with other countries
And
and various
that's
dealings.
not
too.
even including credit cards. So we'll
Yeah.
get back to that. Enjoy the commercials. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Remember Helen Kerwin? As county commissioner, she raised the tax rate over 95%, increased taxes, utility rates, connection fees, and pushed to give the state even more taxing authority. Well, Helen Kerwin's back, handpicked by the Washington swamp to push a voucher scheme that takes funds away from our local schools and gives taxpayer-funded private school vouchers to illegal immigrants. They'd even go to the front of the line ahead of U.S. citizens and legal residents. It's the very same voucher scheme Dwayne Burns stopped last year before delivering the largest tax cut in Texas history, the strongest border security plan in America, and new laws to protect our kids at school and online. Dwayne Burns is the real conservative who puts our community first. He won't be bullied by powerful politicians or D.C. special interest groups because he doesn't work for them. He works for us. Political ad paid for by the Dwayne Burns campaign.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back, Johnson County. I hope everybody enjoyed the little visual there. That was the U.S. debt clock we just watched go up several tens of billions of dollars here in the last few minutes. Before we get started, we're going to go through some commercials here. I know that's probably everybody's favorite part of the program. Joco Community Radio is a member of EMG, a radio and podcast collective proudly serving communities like Johnson and Tarrant County. We're live 365 on the TuneIn Radio Network and on our station app. I highly recommend it. Check out our lineup and more at tuneinjoco.com. We thank our valued partners in helping us amplify the voices of our communities. We especially want to thank Lone Star Patriots for making this and many other episodes possible. LoneStarPatriots.com, they're a conservative local grassroots organization devoted to creating dialogue between citizens and their elected officials. They do numerous events, community service events, as well as many of the great forums that people have attended. They did one with Representative Dwayne Burns here about less than a month, maybe 2 weeks ago. They also did a big debate between all of the school board local candidates. They had one between the state house candidates back in February. So if you're interested in getting involved, LoneStarPatriots.com. Lone Star Patriots also has a Facebook page. Go connect with them there. I encourage you. You heard the commercials. Be sure to connect with Todd Hurd and Associates Attorneys at Law. Use code JOCO2024 for 25% off your first order at thetiffy.com. And join the Swipe Nation today and save on your credit card processing at swipenationusa.com. Locally owned and operated. Reach out to Tiffany at jo.co at jococommunityradio.com for advertising rates as low as $50 a month. It goes to a good cause, especially when you're promoting shows like this where we can have important discussions between young people, old folks. We've had a great amount of people on. We're still looking for people. If you're interested, go to the comments. We're looking for people that I've never met to come on to do a generational politic episode to kind of have a greatest generation, a boomer, a young person to come on and discuss kind of where the country was when they were at the same age point. Of course, we'll have the greatest generation, the GIs, the boomers, all discuss where they were when they were 20 years old, where the country was, where they were heading, what they wanted to see. So we ended off the last segment looking at the U.S. debt clock. Now, I've been watching this go up since high school. There's a really good part on here that I really enjoy. For those who kind of want to go play around with this themselves, this isn't limited to just the show. Let's pull it up here. One thing that I really like, Sean, is they have a time machine here. So you can go back to 1980 and see where we were in 1980 with only about $963 million in debt.
Go to 1989.
We could have funded that with 10% of what our defense budget
Go to
is.
1989, please. I want to prove a point
We've
here.
got 1990 here.
That works.
$3 trillion.
Reagan going into Bush, or Bush was president then. That started
Yeah.
all this. Then Clinton actually balanced the budget for all the nightmare situation he created. He actually balanced the budget.
2000. Let's look at this. $5 trillion. Now let's look at what George W. Bush did.
War on
so
terror.
Got out 2004. $7 trillion. So it went up $2 trillion under W. Bush.
It's his uniparty screwing of the American people.
The 2008 crisis, I don't think this kind of included the bailouts and everything. We were at 11.5 roughly trillion dollars, Sean. And when Obama got out,
I have a point to make. In 2016, that's when I first started kind of paying attention to stuff.
Yeah.
People were, what was that, 2016, the debt?
20.6 trillion.
People were up in arms about 20 trillion. Now we're at 100 plus. When you look at other dealings we have in other situations.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, it is what it is.
So we look at 2020 after Trump got out with the whole COVID thing. Let's go back to 2020. Well, let's go back to 2016. I think 2016 does it better. This is where my first presidential election was. I wasn't old enough to vote, but from a young person's perspective, and I think Sean is going to touch on this as well. I'm going to kind of go on a 5-minute rant here, if that's all right with you, Sean.
It's your show, man.
You're the honored guest.
It's your show. I've
Might
enough.
get into a little bit of a fit here, but for the 6 people that are watching, I hope you enjoy this. This is where the country was, where I was when the first president that I really remember. I've been alive since George Bush's last year of his last term, and I've not really been pleased looking back at history from this perspective. But 2016, the first presidential run that I really got interested in, debt was $20.6 trillion. The total debt, that is kind of credit card debt, everything that we roll up from local debt, was at $68 trillion.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Debt per taxpayer, $177,000. I don't recall taking out $177,000 debt myself. Did you?
I didn't vote
for it.
Well,
Uncle Sam decided that we did. Now we got to pay for it. Anyway, sorry.
So this is where the country was when I was watching Trump get elected. I was a big Trump dude. I'm not so much now, not because I don't like the guy. I think he's a really outstanding man. He has, a good business record. He's been decent about standing out and speaking out against things. But I don't think anybody has really had the balls. Pardon me for the kids watching. We try and leave this a family-friendly show. I don't think anybody has had the balls to come out and actually do something. We've seen Trump go out and support the vaccines, and you'll hear people say, this is the big thing that I see. Well, he didn't push them on us. Well, I recall being a fast food worker in 2016, watching all this stuff happen. I recall 2017, 2019. 2019 was really, I think, when I started getting into big employment opportunities, and they were already pushing masks. If you worked at Chick-fil-A, you had to wear a mask.
Yeah, I was in the Army at the time when they're making us wear.
In 2020 really, when Trump was still in office, before, he kind of got out, the Air Force was still pushing for JROTC people that were going to the flight school to get vaccinated. Where was the uproar when our servicemen were still not taking the vaccine in 2020 and 2021, long before Biden ever got in? So we look at it, $20.6 trillion in debt. Now let's watch where the disappointment in my generation really started. 2020. $28.69 trillion in debt. This is up from what? $8 trillion
Yeah.
in 4 years. And I'm sure, people say, well, that was all the COVID stuff. That was this and that. 2024, this is where we're sitting now. My generation has to pay $35 trillion off, $1 trillion a day. We haven't even started life. We're paying $887 billion for the military, while people in my generation still can't even read or write. Where's the conservative values in instilling the next generation with the principles, the awesomeness to marvel at technology, to marvel at the classical literature, mathematics, understanding the secrets of the universe, getting man on the moon, and we still haven't gotten back to the moon. And our defense budget is the largest of the next 14 countries combined, and we just paid 4 times what Ukraine pays in a year of their defense.
We have the best military in the world, but we're sending everything to the Ukraine and Israel. Something tells me we're spending all our tax money on anything that doesn't help America.
So you want to see where my generation gets when we turn 30. Some of us will turn 30. Some of us, like me, will in 2028 will turn 25. We'll be nearly 30. We will have our own apartment, our own. Probably some of us will have our own kids. My friend Brandon has
already
his
got
own
a few
kid.
out there.
His wife. He already has a wife and kid. We want to give a shout out to our buddy Brandon over at Andrews Air Force Base in DC. This is where we're looking at. Another $10 trillion added in 4 years.
Jacob, can you pull something up, please?
Sure.
Young people dropping out. Just Google that. It started with the young men a few years ago. I think 2 or 3 years ago when they started talking about it, but now it's young women. And this includes millennials, not just Gen Z. Young people are dropping out of the workforce. They're dropping out of church. They're dropping out of school. We're getting less people on record. People are paying tax. Like, people are just dropping out.
Do you trust the World Economic Forum's graph?
I do on this because this does not help them. Worst case scenario, they're underreporting on it.
Yeah.
I say it's a lot higher than they're going to say. Maybe Forbes or Bloomberg has something on it, but we're seeing people drop out. It started with young men. Now it's young women. People are waking up and they're realizing, I can't afford a home. I can't afford a family. I can't afford school. I can't afford anything. And I'm working up to 80 hours a week. I'm doing 2, 3, 4 times more than my dad had to do. And I can't afford half of what he had. Screw it. I'm done. They're just dropping out. I know people like this. They're moving in with multiple roommates. So they only had to pay $200 a month in rent. And they just play video games all day. And they maybe do some pizza delivery to make that $200 plus a little extra to buy the next video game.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you know what? There's always going to be people like that, but it's growing. People are dropping out because we're demoralized.
Yeah.
Our federal government has taken the oomph out of the American people, that spirit.
I think one thing that we look at too is you bring up a really good point, demoralization.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I've said numerous times on the show, we've gone on hikes about getting on the communists and the fascists. It doesn't take an authoritarian dictator to demoralize a population. All it takes is to sit back and let your convenience overrule your ethics, to sit back and let convenience rule your life instead of value and virtue. And I don't mean, just being a good person. There's the old argument, and I'm sure Sean has heard this in his life as well. You're a Catholic, I'm a Protestant, I was raised a Baptist. I've heard the line as well that being a good person does not get you into heaven. I'm sure Sean might agree with that.
Yeah, you have the fruits of your labor are proof of God's grace. Salvation is not work based, but you will have good works as proof of God's grace.
Yeah, as was it
Book of James, I believe.
James had said that. So being a good person does not get you into heaven. Being at work, being consistent in your life, being part of the action. Let's look at the revolution in heaven, the war in heaven when Satan was cast out. And this will develop into something. We'll tie it together, I promise.
I'm waiting.
The angels that sat by would not have been probably as memorable in that fight as the angels that were like, well, we can't have this. Let's throw this red dude out of out of heaven, and let's cast him out. So God would not have put up with, those folks that didn't fight against evil, somebody wanting to be God. Let's look at the people that also wanted to be God. People will make the excuse, well, all those Nazis, they just were acting on orders. Well, so are the people that are pushing vaccines. So are the people that are allowing these drag shows to happen. We're all acting under somebody. The question is, do we continue to act when we know how bad things have gotten? Being part of being a Christian in my religion is that you have to go out and act. In order to show God's good grace to the world, we have to go make things better. Volunteer 5 hours a week. Go out and mentor somebody. Paint an old lady's house. Go talk to an old man for 5 minutes. The greatest insult to American civility was when a young man had told me, and I say he was young, he was probably about a millennial age. Sean remembers this guy. He said, well, what good does it do to go out and block walk in the rain? You're just interrupting people. Those old people don't want to talk to somebody. You remember who I'm talking about?
No.
The gentleman who kind of wore platform shoes to the rally that we were at. You're part of the mafia.
Oh yeah, that guy.
So we both know who we're talking about. And I kind of replied, well, every old person that I had spoken to was glad that I was out block walking in the rain because they were glad that young people were actually carrying on the same values as them. See, the greatest thing that we tell ourselves, there are two lies. Getting involved is inconvenient for everybody else, unless you're trying to get something for yourself, which is what they said about Matthew Lucci, what they said about some folks like John O'Shea. Good people that got involved were stepped on. Why? Because it intruded on the rest of us as convenience. Not everybody's, but some of us, not referring to me inclusive, people got offended. Some people did. They said, well, maybe I don't want you knocking on my door. Maybe I don't want to take that pamphlet. Common sense was a pamphlet. That's what I told somebody. And
That was Thomas Paine, correct?
I was surprised that I didn't get fired from Matthew Lucci's campaign for that. I kind of made a snarky remark at somebody. I tried to hand one voter at a poll a pamphlet. And I wasn't telling them, you had to go in and vote for this person. You had to do this. You had to do that. I wasn't forcing anybody's hand. But it takes a minimal amount of energy to take a pamphlet, to read it. Read one sentence on the way into the polls. Sometimes it changes people's mind. Sometimes it might not change your vote today, but in 100 years, you might look back and say, well, that was the wrong choice that I made. We made a really bad choice. We've talked about a lot of bad choices. Getting Mohammad Mossadegh out of office in Iran. The Iran civil revolution that came up after that.
Oh yeah, that's where the Islamists took over.
Yeah.
That was the 70s?
Yeah,
80s?
1979, I think.
Okay.
So the one thing that really teed me off was that it was so inconvenient for somebody to just take a pamphlet. Now you might be saying, well, Jake, that's kind of petty. It might be. And it might be. I apologize to that person if it was petty. But the whole goal here, and I told the lady this too. I said, ma'am, common sense was a pamphlet once. And she turned back around. She said, what? I said, common sense was a pamphlet. It might have been 70 pages. She kind of walked a little bit closer. I guess she thought I was threatening her. But I said, look, common sense was a pamphlet once too. But after enough people read it, people got the idea that being ruled by a tyrant 3,000 miles away was wrong. That not giving that young country a representative was wrong. Common sense was a pamphlet at one point. But it was the main driver behind getting people on board with the American Revolution. One that would have never been financed, one that would have never been declared, where peace was the only option, the olive branch petition. But it became necessary because enough people were enlightened by a small New Englander's essay that they rethought the entire world. People started to understand that life wasn't about sitting by and letting people be ruled because it was easy. No, sir. Life was not meant to be easy. Life was not meant to be encouraged.
Can I interject
Yeah.
here? Think about how much we were taxed on in 1775 for, right before the revolution.
Yeah.
The tax that started the revolution.
10 cents probably.
Look at what you're taxed now and tell me we don't need massive reform in government. Go back to the national debt, please.
Let's see.
Top left category, debt per taxpayer. Can you zoom in on that, please?
Yeah. Let's see if we can make it full screen here for everybody.
Yeah. So third on right there, debt per taxpayer. That's the loan you owe, according to Uncle Sam. Assuming you're the average American and your family fought in the revolution. You know what? Google what the tax was, right? What was the tax caused the revolution? Wasn't it like 4%, something like that?
Let's look it up. U.S. tax rate, 1776 to present. The Tax Foundation has one on it. Let's see if we have a graph. This might not be...
It was low. It was really low.
Here we go. I mean, it's Wikipedia, but the graph still comes in handy.
Yeah, look at that. Can they see this?
Let's shift it over to it for them. This is federal revenue by type. I mean, margin still holds true.
Yeah.
1792.
It starts spiking
2.5%.
around 1920, by the way. That's a whole nother conversation. I wonder if we could bring Stephen Swain in for the banking conversation.
Probably could.
But staying on the tax, know what's wrong with our government? Uncle Sam currently thinks you own a small mortgage. If this isn't a small mortgage, because most homes are $500,000 now.
And there's another thing I want to point out, Sean, if that's all right with you.
Oh, please, it's your show.
1913.
Federal Reserve.
Roughly at the same time, William Jennings Bryan, a big socialist. I'm not saying that, to point fingers. Income tax
Wilson
became a thing.
That was President Wilson.
And ever since then, look at where we made most of our money. Tariffs and excise. A young government, most of our things came from taxing imports and exports to other countries. Now, towards 1934 here, payroll tax and income tax. So your pay from work.
So I get
paid for your income.
So they tax me before I get my paycheck. They tax me after I get my paycheck.
And your death tax.
They tax me. And they tax me when I buy anything. Now I'm paying the inflation tax. So let's be real. Inflation is a tax upon the middle class.
Yeah.
I think the system's broken, Jacob.
Well, Sean, I've always believed that if a government has to tax you on everything, they spend too much. And if a government has the money to spend $200 billion abroad, where we have, apparently this is another thing. People will.
Do you know what we could have done with $200 billion? We could have bailed out the entire student loan crisis, fixed the veteran homelessness issue, redone all of our national infrastructure, and still had money left over. That's a lot of money to be sending to Israel, Ukraine, and through the back door to the Palestine-Hamas movement. We are sponsoring people who don't care about us. Some directly hate us. We've given money since the Obama administration to Iran. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I wonder how much that ended up in Russia and China.
I wonder who their Secretary of State was.
We have spent trillions on China, not just the government, but private investors. We have funded the world against ourselves. Bring it home. So
we're two young men at the peak of our game.
I don't know. My back's kind of hurting. I'm hungover too. I am actually hungover.
We're two young men moderately at the peak of our game.
My knees
My
hurt.
eyesight isn't the best.
I have a dry scalp.
But the point is young people want to act. Young people want to change things. The problem is letting them get involved.
Well,
the problem is fixing the generational divide in this country.
There's two things that can happen. One, the baby boomers actually give us a succession plan. Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z work together with coming up with Gen Alpha in about 8 years. And we actually fight our way out of this place we're in, dig ourselves out of this grave. Or the boomers don't do that because boomers don't really care. And that's kind of, they're retired. They're fat and happy. I don't blame them. They had the best economy in world history. Screw everyone else came after. And the music is going to stop, and it's going to get real ugly. and we're going to have to cut everything. Like, if speaking government-wise, if it's not veteran, military, diplomacy related, like those very narrow categories, it's going to get cut. Now, Milei down in Argentina wasn't like 70,000 jobs the first
He
week.
cut 55% of the
55,
federal bureaucracy.
That's what we're going to have to do. That is the only way to ensure a safe crash. The empire's coming home, which is good for us. We need to be isolationist. The world's falling apart, in case anyone hasn't noticed. We're doing fine. We have our own crazy stuff going on. Let's bring it home, focus on ourselves. Maybe we can talk to Britain, Canada, Mexico, still our immediate neighbors, that kind of thing. But that's it. If they're not in the club, don't worry about it. We need to stop worrying about Taiwan. We need to stop worrying about Israel. Stop worrying about Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, Germany. Bring it home. That's the only way to get out of this. We have to cut everything, bring it all home, and focus on America.
I think the big question here is, where do we start? A lot of times on the show, we've talked about getting involved. We've talked about the problems.
I don't think anything's going to be able to change till the baby boomers age out. They're such a large generation that they will always control the voter trends, and they're so old they're not going to change. And that's not something against them. We'll be the same way when we're their age. We're old, set in our ways, can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
In order for anyone under 60 to try and fix this, they're just going to have to age out. We need people who understand how the internet works to fix this.
You mentioned that. That really brings up the whole Tim Good and
Tim Good.
He
won,
debate.
didn't he?
Yeah.
Thank God. I love Tim Good.
So
break up this Johnson County Boys Club.
The big thing here is we need to get young people involved. When you get young people involved and you allow them to act, they're not forced to take on a role because they have to, but because they want to. When you get young people who want to make change, when you get young people, Matthew Lucci, myself, Sean.
I'm never running for office.
Maybe not on a political thing, but you're going to have a part in this system somewhere. Banking, finance, something. When we start to realize that we are a representative Republican democracy, that we are a pluralist society where people are going to have to work together. That was a staple in the Gilded Age. Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, fought for the safety of immigrants just as much as natural-born citizens.
On one condition, they assimilated and contributed. Not mass migrants with no skilled labor. He was referring to the Irish, the Italians, people coming here because they wanted to work.
Factory laborers.
They wanted to be American.
Where do we go from here? People are going to have to realize that we need to compromise. It's not about shoving one side out of office and keeping one side. That's what the Nazis did.
And the communists.
That's what the communists did. That's what Pol Pot, Fidel Castro, Ho Chi Minh. Name one of those places that had another party. Because that one party was so supreme. It was so right. It was so correct. There was just no reason to have somebody else in office. There was no comparison. But I tell you what it did show, a lot of insecurity, which is where the system is at now. When we advocate to get rid of one side entirely, to refuse to work with somebody, that doesn't show conviction. It doesn't show set in your ways. It shows that you are very, very insensitive, very insecure about where your system is. But sometimes the most stable systems work together to achieve a common goal. The Democrats may be right that the environment is a big deal. I agreed with RFK on that. We shouldn't have, noise pollution by a hospital or building a railroad through a schoolhouse. God bless you. Stick with us. Watch again Thursday. We appreciate your views, your listening. Here where we can change one mind at a time. May God bless America and the blood of Christ wash over our government. We desperately need it.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is